Hey guys, we're going to be looking this evening at a lot of the social and cultural changes that were going on in America during the period of the Gilded Age, the late 1800s, early 1900s. The picture that you're looking at right now, you have a bunch of people just enjoying themselves and just chilling, hanging out at Central Park in New York, late 1800s. And we're going to say this is one of the things that people expect during this time is that there is this expectation that leisure is a part of the quality of life. And it's something that a lot of the workers are going to be actually demanding. That they have shorter working hours and that they have more time just to play and have a good time. The cities are going to be a huge factor in the cultural development of the United States in the late 1800s. So many people wanted to go to the cities for so many reasons. The urban population is going to increase about sevenfold or so after the Civil War. In New York City alone, you had about 1 million people there at about 1860 or so. There were about 3 million people by about 1900. Chicago also was up and coming. Detroit. I mean, there's so many of these big cities, and largely it's because of industrialization. All these changes happening. People are going to where it's at. And definitely the cities were where it's at. Again, very important, that statistic that I have on top that you guys need to really make sure that you remember, that most Americans are going to be living in urban areas by 1920. So that's the year that census was taken, which is done every 10 years. So in 1920, basically, it showed for the first time that you had more people living in urban areas. And they defined that as having a population of about 2,500 or more. So it's a really defining change that we're going to see during the time period. Why do we have the growth of cities? One of the big reasons is going to be immigration. I don't think that you would have had the growth of cities as much as you did during this time without the immigration of all these people coming in from Southern and Eastern Europe during this time. Natural increase, of course, people are still making babies and whatnot, but it's not going to be the most important thing. It's a small part of the growth of America, but it's still happening, or I should say growth of cities. You've got better transportation going on. We looked at all the different modes of transportation, from railroads to streetcars to subways, steam ocean liners, trolleys. I mean, there's so many different ways that people can get to the cities, move around in the cities. So transportation definitely is going to be a reason why you're going to have the growth of cities, because it's easier to get there, it's easier to get around. And cities are cool. I mean, like I've told you guys, I spent some time in New York City, and I mean, everything was literally at your fingertips. You just walk outside and, within a distance of, a half mile, quarter mile, whatever. I mean, everything was right there, from entertainment to culture, to basic necessities. So yeah, cities they're cool. And then the better paying jobs are going to be in the cities as well. But just all the conveniences that come around with being in the cities. Remember that in the rural areas during this time, there's not a lot of electricity, going into these places. Again, the culture is not really there. So, people who are looking for these kind of things are not going to go out to the farm, square dance all night long. They want to go to the city and they want to have a good time and enjoy the entertainment and culture that comes along with that. Now, sorry about that if I have to stop it every now and then. My keyboard is not working all that great. It's getting stuck. So sometimes I might have to stop it and hopefully I can get it to work again. But anyways, so one of the things that we're going to be looking at is definitely the change of just the geography and the urban landscape itself. The city is such a place of contrast. Like I said, it's so cool. When you go to major cities like San Francisco and New York City and Chicago, not only do you have these, it's like the urban jungle, the concrete jungle. So you've got all these big buildings and pavement and asphalt and all of that stuff. But also you're going to have a lot of parks and places that people go to get away from everything. Now, one of the things about the early cities that I kind of touched upon was that the cities were kind of put together rather quickly in some cases during this time, just out of necessity. So there's not a whole lot of central planning going on. And with more people and desires to kind of clean up the city and make it better places, there were calls for reform eventually. So this is when you're going to start to have people who deliberately want to create cities that look nice, that they provide places of refuge from the urban jungle, that they're cleaned up and whatnot. So you will have the development of parks and public buildings, and it's going to be a little bit more deliberate in how they're going to be planning things, not so haphazardly. And again, a lot of that is because of the congestion of the city and the fact that you have so many people and so many buildings and whatnot. People just really wanted something a little bit different where they can escape all of that. The wealthy played a really big role in the urban landscape in terms of creating parks, and we'll talk about like museums and things like that, because someone's got to pay for all that stuff. And like the city governments will put some money into that, but largely it's going to be your wealthy. They're going to put money towards this, especially those people who are looking to have a higher standing in society. This was one way for them to do that, is they could use philanthropy or charity, put money towards these types of things, and it kind of would elevate them in society, all highfalutin and whatnot. So again, the wealthy played a pretty big role in that. And Central Park is just such a really cool place. I love these old photographs of these people just enjoying themselves in the park. And if you've ever been there, there are some sections in Central Park where it's literally like you are in the wilderness. You have no idea that this crazy urban jungle is basically surrounding you. It's just really nice. It was planned beautifully. A guy named what's his name? Daniel Burnham, Frederick Olmsted. They're going to work together on creating Central Park, and you can see from this map that I have here that it's planned out. Again, it's not something that they're just haphazardly putting together. This was definitely planned out. And I believe the same people who did Central Park, so Olmsted, Burnham, they also worked on Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, which is also like really, really, really cool. What else we got? And again, just some pictures of Central Park. You can see where the cursor is up here. The houses, or the apartments, I should say, that are going to be lining Central Park, they're pretty ritzy. I believe it's Fifth Avenue that borders Central Park, which is very, very high end. A lot of celebrities and musicians and stuff. I believe John Lennon lived in the apartments that bordered Central Park. There's actually a really monument to him inside of Central Park. It's they call it it's a little section they call Strawberry Fields, or the Beatles song, if you're familiar with that. This is kind of a cool little memorial to him, because he did live, like I said, in this area, and he was shot right outside of his apartment. Just enjoying themselves in the park. If you've been to Central Park, this is still there. This is the big pool, kind of like in the middle of the park. When I was there, there was nobody canoeing, riding boats in the middle of it, but apparently at one point in time you could. You can see all the people. All these people, they really wanted to enjoy life. Life is not just about working. And people are going to really realize that during this time, that everyone deserves to go out and spend time with their families and just have some downtime. The New York Metropolitan Museum of Art, or it's just kind of called the Met, this was built during the Gilded Age, and one of the reasons why this actually was able to be built was because of the wealthy. You've got, like I said, these people who are looking to may have their standing in society increase, and one way to do that was to donate money to these types of endeavors. And so you had the development of all kinds of museums in major cities, libraries, natural history museums, theaters, concert halls, and all of that kind of stuff. And the architecture of these things, I think it's really cool as well, because no longer are they just going to be these slabs of concrete, whatever they're just going to put up. They want to make the cities look nice. In 1893, the United States, the city of Chicago, actually is going to compete with several nations throughout the world to hold what was called the World's Fair, which went on every year, and it traveled from city to city to city. In each city, they would put together a proposal, and they would say, hey, this is what we have to offer. We're awesome. Have the World's Fair come to our city. And Daniel Burnham and some others are going to be working on this proposal to try to get the committee to bring the fair to Chicago. It's kind of like the Olympics, same type of thing. It's like, excuse me, you gotta sell your city. Why is Chicago the best city? What is Chicago going to do that's completely different than any other city that had held this before? Paris will hold the World's Fair at some point in time. I can't remember if it's before or after this, but one of the things that they're going to put together that really enticed the committee to choose them as a city, or as the city for the World's Fair, was they put together the Eiffel Tower. So there were all kinds of crazy concoctions, by the way, crazy ideas that people had to try to create something that was really unique, that had never been done before, that would really catch the eye of the committee. So the architects, again, Daniel Burnham and others, they're going to create what they call the White City. So this is in the neoclassical design, which was really popular during this time, and everything was going to be painted white, which eventually it was. But there was one thing in particular which is kind of funny that actually gave the fair to Chicago. It was a crazy idea that had never been done before, and the committee thought it was a really cool idea. And that proposal is going to include, I'm going to skip ahead so I can find wherever that slide is since I'm talking about it. Oh, there it is. So the proposal included this new thing that had never been done before, which was called the Ferris wheel. First one ever built was for the World's Fair. They were like train cars. You can see really big. Here's another perspective of it. The thing was massive. There ain't no way in hell you catch me on that thing. Okay, and literally people were terrified to get on this because they were afraid the cars were going to fall off, or that the wheel itself was going to somehow dislodge from the center here and roll across the fair or whatever. Since I'm like terrified of heights, right? No, I don't think I would go on this thing. So yeah, that was one of the big things that was in the proposal that really caught the eye of the committee. And so they got the fair in Chicago, and they created this thing called the Great White City. So some really cool pictures. There's an overview of, like, more of an aerial view of the city itself. They had all kinds of different exhibitions. They had exhibitions on natural history. They had a building that was devoted to like women in America and throughout the world, which is kind of cool. I think they had an insect building, and they had all kinds of different things that people could go and enjoy the exhibit. So, like, if you've been to the LA County Fair, the LA County Fair has had some pretty cool exhibits. They've had that one, I think it was a couple years ago, was the bodies, which was kind of gross, but it was still kind of interesting. So just like, think about that. This is on a much grander scale, though. Now, people from all over the world are going to come to the World's Fair in Chicago. Here's another perspective of the fair. One of the sad things about this, actually, and I can't remember what year it actually happened, but there was a fire. This was sometime after the event. They had kept up all these buildings, but there was a fire, and pretty much everything had burnt down. So you can't go and see this today. There might be one or two buildings that are still standing, but it's not something that you can go and visit. There's that Ferris wheel again. Actually, one other thing before I move on is that for those of you who are reading The Devil in the White City, okay, the book is about the creation and construction of the World's Fair, and you'll read about the Ferris wheel and all that stuff. But there's two stories in one. So you've got the creation of the World's Fair itself, but then also you had America's first really well-known serial killer. He used to prey on women who went to the fair. So it's two stories in one. It's a really good book. I can't recommend it enough. It's got so many references to things that we've been talking in class regarding this unit. So hope those of you who are reading it for your English class, that you enjoy it. All right. Another thing going on in the cities, and this also just goes along with industrialization, is you have this rise of mass consumption. So you've got all these consumer products that are being purchased, and one group that is rising, fairly significantly during this time is the middle class. And the middle class has a lot of power when it comes to consumption of a lot of these new consumer goods. They're the ones that have a little bit more money in their pocket to purchase a lot of, just the general, run-of-the-mill goods, like shoes and ready-made clothing and all that kind of stuff. They've got the ability to purchase these things through the money that they have. So the middle class does have a lot of power because they're the ones that are going to be really demanding the products that companies, businesses, factories are going to be producing. One of the things you do see, though, that goes hand in hand with that, is that understand that, even though I'm saying you have the rise of the middle class during this time, and they're quite powerful, remember that most of the people in society still are going to be at the lower levels. But even so, people at the lower levels still are going to see that their incomes and their standard of living is going to be rising, just like every other group in society during this time. And the demand for new consumer goods was really high. The middle class has a lot of power when it comes to what is going to be produced, but everyone wants a lot of the new things that are coming out of industrialization. There's all kinds of new consumer products and merchandising techniques. One of the things that people don't have to do anymore, and again, especially your middle class. And the lower class people, like I said, their incomes were rising, but it was much slower than other groups in society. So, they're not going to be able to really partake in a lot of the stuff. So when we have sewing machines, not many of the lower class people are going to be able to produce, they're not going to be able to purchase the clothing in the stores. They're still going to have to hand make a lot of things that they're going to have to wear. But yeah, people definitely were buying clothing in stores, and we'll talk about department stores and all the products that are part of that. But like, for instance, sorry, I got props today. So ready-made clothing. So this is my new cycling jersey, okay, that came in the mail the other day. We'll talk about mail order in a little bit too. But I don't have to make this myself anymore. I can just go to the store, or I can go online and I can just order this, which is really cool. I wouldn't know how to make this. I can't even sew a freaking button on a shirt. So it's nice to have ready-made clothing. Something that's kind of interesting that comes out of that is, now people are going to have more outfits to wear. Nothing like we have today. Oh my gosh, it'd be embarrassing if I took my little webcam and I went over to my closet and I showed you all the clothes that I have. And I'm sure some of you, your clothes and drawers and cabinets or whatever, full of clothing. Well, back then, a lot of the lower class people, they might have one, maybe two sets of clothing, but because of ready-made clothing, people are going to have, in a lot of cases, 3, 4, 5, sometimes, upper class people, 7, 8, 9, 10 different outfits, and so you had to have something to put that in. So one thing that's kind of interesting is the idea of closets. Homes that were built before this time, they didn't have closets because there was no need for like a closet, unless they may have had a little tiny room where they put brooms and things like that. But the whole idea of a closed closet is brand new for this time period. So a lot of the newer homes built will have closets for clothes. Another thing too is style. People become more concerned about what they're wearing, brand names, and looking cool and whatnot. So personal style is something that a lot of people are also going to participate in. Although again, we're looking mostly at your upper class, some of your middle class people like that as well. Food is also going to be produced and merchandised a little bit different. One of the things that you have coming out of industrialization is the development of the canned goods. There's my red kidney beans. Kidney beans. I actually like kidney beans. So you've got these tin cans that were produced, and that's going to help women out quite a bit because I don't even know how you grow beans. I don't even know. That's embarrassing. What do you do? How do you get beans? I don't know. Do they grow in the ground? However, it doesn't really matter because you know what? I can just buy it in a freaking can. I don't have to worry about how to grow it or whatever, however it comes about to be. Same thing with canned vegetables and whatnot. I don't have to worry about growing that anymore. It's just I buy it in a can. So, that's a plus for women. It makes it easier, especially since a lot of women are working in the factories. They go home and they don't necessarily want to sit there and go out to their garden and pick their little beans and, take the little tops off and take the little, I don't know what the heck that like spine thing is, take it off. It's time consuming. If you've just worked in a factory for like freaking 15 hours a day, you don't want to be like picking beans out of your garden. Well, like, relax, watch some Netflix. No Netflix during this time, guys. No TV yet. So it's good for women because it helps them out a little bit. It makes life a little bit easier for them. That the double burden they have of working in the factories and eventually having to come home and also cook and take care of the family or whatnot. Refrigeration, how exciting. It's actually really important. A couple things, you've got refrigerated railroad cars, so now you're going to be able to move meat products across the country. We'll see that Chicago is going to be the biggest area where you have a huge meat packing industry. But without refrigerated cars, you can't transport the meat because it'll rot. So refrigerated railroad cars is important because it's going to, again, increase the health, the diet and the health of Americans because they're going to be eating better foods. Ice, artificially frozen ice. Again, it's about preservation of food. So eating better diets, better health leads to longevity. People aren't going to be dying or getting sick from different diseases that are related to malnutrition. Also, during the Gilded Age, because you have so many different consumer products, where are you going to sell them all? One of the things that was developed, what were called the 5 and dimes. It says 5 and 10 cent store. They're called 5 and dimes. So you have these chain stores. This is something you never had before. You would have these mom and pop stores where you would have people that owned them and, they just sold what they had and did everything on their own. With the 5 and dimes, it's almost kind of like a franchise, sort of. You've got this chain. So you might have a Woolworths in Chicago. You might have a Woolworths in another city that maybe 50 miles away or something. So it's not just one location. There's a chain of these things all over the country. And one of the things that's going to do is it's going to decrease the cost of products because these companies are purchasing these things in massive amounts. So that helps to decrease the cost, and they're going to cause prices. They're going to decrease their prices on their goods to the consumer. So it's a positive thing for the people. Now there is something a little bit negative about this. The 5 and dimes were kind of like the Walmarts of their time period. So you still had your mom and pop places where they kind of did the same thing. However, these chain stores, they were powerful and they had a lot of money. They could purchase more products. They could charge less for their products. So whenever you had these 5 and dime stores going into cities, a lot of times the mom and pop stores that were around these 5 and dimes would usually be put out of business. So that's kind of a negative thing. You also have the A&P grocery stores. It's just a chain. I think they're still around. When I used to live in Michigan, we had A&P supermarkets. So it's like a Vons or a Ralph's or whatever. So yeah, the last point that I have on there, that it threatened to replace established merchants. That's just them kind of like being the Walmarts of their time period. There's a picture of the A&P. This is from later. This looks like, from how they're dressed, maybe the 30s or the 40s. Mail order catalogs also were something that was new. And this is really cool for people living in rural areas because, the people living in rural areas, yeah, they're conservative and they still kind of want to, do their thing and whatnot, but they still wanted to participate in a lot of stuff that industrialization had to provide. I mean, there's a lot of farm equipment and farm tools and stuff now that are being made that are cheaper, and they want to partake in that, but there's not like these large stores or anything in the rural areas. So there's this company called Montgomery Ward, and I remember them from a kid. They actually went from being a mail order catalog business to actually having their own stores all over the country. I think the closest one to this area, gosh, where was that? Well, I know there was one in Orange County somewhere. I'm not really sure about this area, but it's kind of like the stores were like a Kohl's, very similar to that. But again, before they actually had the stores, they were simply a mail order catalog company. So people could literally like get these books in the mail, and they were fat. And you just sit there and you could go through all of the pages, and they had all of the consumer products of the day that people wanted, and everything was in there. Like I said, from the let's say from kitchen items to toys, farm equipment, all that stuff was in there. So it was, like I said, it's a really good thing for people living in rural areas because they can purchase a lot of the items that are being produced that they wouldn't normally be able to get. So Montgomery Ward was the first, in 1872. So they were the first to actually do this. And then Sears and Roebuck. Sears is still around today. They started off as a mail order company as well. Now I have on there this, and I haven't talked about that quite yet with you. The Granges were like, they were like these farmer organizations that came together to deal with their issues. So we'll see that the catalog company, especially Montgomery Wards, their nickname, by the way, was Monkey Wards. I have no idea why they were called Monkey Wards. But they are associated with the Granges because these farmer organizations, again, they thought they were kind of getting the short end of stick on things, so they wanted to be able to participate in the consumerism of the time. So Montgomery Ward is going to help facilitate that. All right. And there's just a picture of a Sears, an old Sears and Roebuck catalog. Now, I remember catalogs when I was a kid. We used to get JCPenney catalogs and Sears catalogs. They used to come all the time. And, me and my sister, we would always look at the catalogs that came during Christmas. And we would go through, like, the toy section. And we flipped through it. And we always circled everything in the catalog of all of the toys we wanted. My parents used that when they went shopping for Christmas stuff. Department stores were also new during this time. Macy's was one of the first department stores. If you go to the original Macy's in New York, it's really, really, really cool. It's beautiful in there. They've got these beautiful wood escalators that you can go up, and they have these big chandeliers and stuff. So department stores it was exciting to go shopping. And I think I may have told you this, that people actually dressed up to go out shopping. It was considered entertainment. It was something that people wanted to do. They wanted to be out and about in the town. It was a leisure activity to go to the department stores, just to go shopping in general. One of the cool things about a department store is everything's right there. Department stores may be a little bit different today, but the early department stores, they might have a floor that has clothing on it, a floor that has appliances on it, sporting goods. So they carried all kinds of different stuff in there. And like I have in there, it really helped to create a sense of wonder and excitement in how they put it together. Like I said, the inside of these things were absolutely gorgeous. With the wood floors and the chandeliers and all of that. Just really, really kind of cool. Marshall Field's still around today also. They're another department chain store. They're based out of Chicago. Again, the architecture on these things is pretty cool. As I mentioned earlier, leisure is something that people began to demand, that it's an essential part of just being a human being, and it's not cool, it's not right that these employers are forcing workers to work 80-hour work weeks. So, one of the things labor unions were trying to do was to decrease the amount of time that people are working to provide more leisure time. So it becomes one of these expectations. And I think definitely today that our society believes that having fun, playing around, having leisure, it's a right of all of us. It's not something that is a privilege. It's something that we all should have. Definitely a redefinition of what leisure is during this time. People think that's okay to be lazy. You know what? I'm not going to sit there and I'm not going to, clean the house 24/7. I'm going to sit here and record awesome APUSH lectures. Right? Anyways, so people are looking for new sources of recreation, entertainment. People want to go out. These people in the background in this picture looks like they're probably in a saloon or a bar playing board games, gambling, just going out and having a good time. It's healthy to do that. People went to amusement parks. You guys like to go to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm, Magic Mountain, all these places. Well, amusement parks got their start during the Gilded Age. One of the first ones was Coney Island in New York. Place is pretty cool. I know they closed it down, and I'm not sure if they reopened it or not, but some of the original roller coasters are still there. It's really neat. But again, people go here just to have a good time. Coney Island actually is located right by a beach, and this is the beach by the amusement park. I have no idea what these people are doing, but it looks like they're having a good time. How about those bathing suits? Oh, very, very attractive. And there's the tornado. That's their original roller coaster. Now let's crack up with this particular slide because you got this kid down here who looks like, you know, he's about to vomit or something. So either he just got off the tornado and he's about to throw up, or he just had some bad clams. I don't know. I think it's funny though. We already talked about parks and recreation. So Central Park, definitely an area that people are going to go to and just to relax and have fun. Looks like this guy's a player. Not sure which girl he wants to get, but he's certainly giving that girl the goo-goo eye. Oh my goodness, the circus. Today the circus has really bad reputation, largely because of the animals and how the elephants and the horses and whatnot are being treated. The circus was very routine. I went to the circus a bazillion times when I was a kid. It was just something that we do. I do have to say, though, that I do not approve of circuses today that actually have these animals, particularly the elephants. But the circus was something that people enjoyed going to. There were all kinds of little shows and activities that went along with it. Oh my goodness. You had the freak shows, also part of the circus acts. So here you have a bearded lady, and, you might be like, ooh, have the heebie-jeebies or whatever, but one thing just to keep in consideration is that, this is a woman actually, if you haven't figured that out. She and other people who are like the bearded ladies and whatnot, they have a chemical hormonal imbalance, which is going to allow them to grow this facial hair and sometimes full body hair as well. So yeah, I mean, we kind of like look and gawk at it and stuff, but just understand this is a medical thing for some of these people. And unfortunately, because they were considered freaks or not, they became quite marginalized in society. And some of them, this was the only way that they were able to make money, which is kind of sad. You've got the crazy trapeze artists, the Imperial Viennese troupe. Oh, but that's no fun. They have a net down there. You want it more dangerous. Take that net away. Oh, this is the original Tom Thumb. That's a guy. I believe he was like 35 or so when this photograph was taken. He's a politically correct term, little person. He was a part of the Barnum and Bailey Circus for I don't know how many years. Seriously, like, I have some pictures here. I have no clue what they are. I just think they're kind of interesting. What people did and what circuses were like and different shows that people went to. This was just entertainment for the time period. I think it's very different than what we would consider entertainment today. I have no idea what this lady's doing. There's another bearded woman. Again, that is a woman, and it's a hormonal imbalance that allows her to grow the facial hair like that. This is the Lion Man. Same thing. It's just a guy who has a hormonal imbalance, and yeah, he's able to have his hair in strange ways to make him look like a lion. And his chest is rather fuzzy as well. Again, I really don't know what's going on here. Some of these pictures really kind of creep me out a little bit. I would have loved to have gone to a show like this. It's just, like I said, so different than what we consider entertainment today. This is the original Jumbo, the elephant. That was the famous elephant from the Barnum and Bailey Circus. Again, one of those things that today a lot of people, including myself, have issues with in terms of how these elephants are treated. Clowns! Oh my god. This is like the freakiest picture ever. Sorry if you have like a weird type of a reaction to clowns. Usually when we're in class, it's awesome. I'll like usually scream when I put this thing on the screen and people all freak out and it's kind of funny and whatnot. But yeah, some freaky little people clowns. That'll give you nightmares tonight. Another thing that people did is they went to Wild West shows. Buffalo Bill Cody, he got together all of these cowboys and like real Indians as well. And what they would do is they would reenact Indian battles. And people paid to actually go and watch that. Again, just another source of entertainment for the time period. Maybe you've heard of Annie Oakley. She was amazing when it came to shooting. She was a big-time sharpshooter. She could, shoot things from any distance. She was known for riding a horse, standing on it, and shooting like clay plates and stuff that they would throw up into the air. I think I have a picture of that. Yeah. So it was part of the Wild West show. This is Buffalo Bill Cody, and I believe that is Sitting... I always get this confused. It's either Sitting Bull or Crazy Horse. Let me see if I have that in my notes. I do not. So it's either Sitting Bull or Crazy Horse. I believe it's Crazy Horse that was killed. I'm going to go Sitting Bull on this, but I could be wrong. It doesn't really matter. But you had Native American Indians that signed on to this to help reenact these Indian battles. It was a way for them to gain a little money. The situation for Indians, as you guys are going to see, is pretty dire during this time. There are all kinds of other things that people like to do for entertainment. Just go out and have a drink at saloons, shopping, tea rooms, theater, all kinds of stuff. Spectator sports are going to be massive during this time. Baseball is going to be America's pastime, and that's developed during the Gilded Age. So baseball, you've got the Cincinnati Red Stockings, and you can see why they were called the Red Stockings. They were the first salaried team of Major League Baseball. You had the American League that was formed first, and then later, you had the National League that was formed first in 1876, and then the American League shortly after in 1901. You had the first modern World Series, the Red Sox versus the Pirates in 1903, and the Red Sox actually won that game. How do you like those outfits there? They look kind of cushiony. Here's the West Point baseball team. It's like a nice group of guys. Oh, yep, here's one of the Chicago White Sox players. Now, there was a lot of issues with gambling and baseball. I'm not sure if I have a slide on this somewhere else, but the Chicago White Sox in particular, there was a situation, I believe it was 1919, where there were about, how many were 13? So I think there was 13 of them or so. They decided they were going to throw the World Series. So they had gotten to the World Series, and they decided they were deliberately going to throw it, and they would all bet on the fact that they were going to lose, so they would make a lot of money. And again, you had gambling rings that were in on this and whatnot, and it was totally illegal. There were 9 of them involved, right? 9 men, 8, sorry, because there's a movie called 8 Men Out, and then it's about they called them the Chicago Black Sox because of what happened. And all those guys that were part of that were all banned from baseball for the rest of their lives. One of the names that you might be familiar with is Shoeless Joe Jackson. If you ever seen the film, what's it called? What's his name? Oh my God, I'm horrible right now with names and stuff. Field of Dreams. So if you've ever seen Field of Dreams, one of the characters that comes back from the cornfield is Shoeless Joe Jackson. Oh, there they are right there. So that's the Chicago Black Sox team of 1919. So like I said, about 8 of these guys are going to be thrown out of baseball because of their illegal dealings with gamblers to throw the World Series. And that kind of goes along. If you think about it, it goes along with the corruption that was so rampant during the Gilded Age. So it goes along right with that. Even though this is a little bit later, it's still very relevant for the time. Football, very, very different than football today. Football is all like, macho and testosterone and all of that. Sorry if you're a football player. Not everyone is like that. Football during the Gilded Age was more so like rugby, and it was a sport that was kind of reserved for the upper class elite. And you can kind of tell these guys, they look kind of soft, huh? They look very cozy with each other. Actually, I don't know. This guy right here looks a little too comfortable. Kind of a cool picture, though. So like I said, the football during this time appealed to the elites, originated in colleges and universities, very similar to rugby. They didn't have all of the protections that they had today, like with the helmets and the pads and stuff like that. Because it was so dangerous and so many of these guys had head injuries and other injuries, there was this need for some type of a governmental organization to implement reforms in this. So that's why you had the creation of the National College Athletic Association, or the NCAA, which governs college sports. And again, when it first started, it was largely about trying to make college sports safer, especially with football. Okay, and make it more honest as well. The NCAA is also there to prevent a lot of the illegalities with gambling and stuff from college sports. There's another football team. I'm not sure, I can't read that in the background, exactly where that's from. Boxing, hysterical, huh? Look at these guys, look at these outfits. You wouldn't necessarily consider these guys heavyweight boxers in today's society, but yeah, they were back then. John Sullivan, I know I have a picture of him coming up. He's going to be the first quote-unquote heavyweight champion of the world in 1882. Lots of gambling going on in boxing. And because boxing was, pretty brutal, you got a bunch of people, punching each other and whatnot, that a lot of states are going to declare boxing illegal until after World War I, which ends in 1919. There's John Sullivan. So he was the first heavyweight champion of the world. Love the outfit. Absolutely love it. Bicycling, very popular form of entertainment for a lot of people. It's as a cyclist myself, it's definitely, I think, a way to free yourself from a lot of the constraints that just daily life puts on you. There's just a sense of freedom that you get when you ride your bike. So that was something that was really popular. And the Tour de France and all of that, that'll get started during this time too. Women, in particular, love to ride bikes. Again, when you look at women's lives, this is the Victorian era, and so women, the whole cult of domesticity that is still going on. So women's lives have been so constrained for so long, and getting on a bicycle and being able just to, ride around, go where you want, not be constricted by anything, it was very liberating for a lot of women. So this was a pastime that a lot of women enjoyed. Basketball developed 1891. It was developed largely to have some type of a winter sport. Literally, you had it was like a fruit basket that you would collect fruit. So on a farm, you collect fruit, you put it in the basket. They decided to take that basket and put it on a pole, and then they had a ball, and they would run around and they would throw the ball, and the goal is to get the ball into the basket. And so obviously that's going to develop into what we know as basketball today. Very popular game, though, that was played during this time, especially in the winter months. Horse racing, very popular. Again, gambling. You have gambling with a lot of these different sports. A lot of it's really dirty. A lot of these races and boxing matches and football games and stuff, like I said, they were all thrown in some cases so people could make money off of it. Women in sports, definitely women are going to play sports. Yeah, I know I've got a lot of girl basketball players in class this year. Check that out. Look at those uniforms. I'm sure the San Dimas Lady Saints would love to wear those types of uniforms to play basketball. And that actually would be a really cool thing. It's kind of like, like a throwback game where you would have the girls wearing that type of uniform. It would just be kind of fun. But you can see some of the other sports that women enjoyed: tennis, croquet. A lot of the early sports that women were quote-unquote allowed to play tended to be a little bit more on the feminine side of thing, like tennis. Not saying that tennis is a feminine sport or anything, but it was more acceptable for women. It wasn't something where it was like, you had full-on body contact. Okay, croquet. I mean, if you know what croquet is, croquet. Okay, it's like for old people. Sorry if you play croquet. But as time progresses, women will definitely be playing more strenuous and more physical type of sports, like basketball, for instance. Crew, by the way, if you're wondering what that is, that's rowing. That's really hard to do, but really fun. Music and theater is going to grow during the Gilded Age. We've talked about some of this already. What did I say? Falsely accused. Cowboys race for a wife. I don't know what that means. Actually, that's the first time I ever saw that. Anyways, vaudeville shows were really popular in the late 1800s. Think of variety show. That's what a vaudeville show is. People would come from the cities and the surrounding areas, and they buy a ticket, they go in, and they would see people dancing. They would do little skits. You might have a dog that does commands, and some girl who's jumping through hula hoops, whatever, I don't know, jugglers, magicians, singers, all that kind of stuff. Part of variety shows. Very bizarre in some cases. This looks like some type of a rendition of Alice in Wonderland. Oh, yeah, no clue. I think this is something Shakespearean, Midsummer's Night's Dream, or something like that. One of the things I like about this particular slide in the background, you can see different advertisements. Because you have all of these new products that are going to be developed during this time, advertising is going to be a new industry as well to sell their products. Minstrel shows, which we've already talked about, those are going hot and heavy during this time. So if you remember, we talked about what Jim Crow was, and that was kind of the origination of Jim Crow was a character from the minstrel shows. Movies. Talked about the Great Train Robbery. Again, the early films, like if you watch the Great Train Robbery, you'd be like, oh my god, this is so freaking boring. Like, pointless, no plots. The first, I think, important film is D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. It's something that you might want to remember. Basically, it glorifies the Ku Klux Klan. Excuse me. And, of course, the main villain in the film is going to be an African-American person. One thing that's kind of interesting about this is, from my understanding, The Birth of a Nation, which celebrates the Ku Klux Klan, was Woodrow Wilson's favorite film of all time. I don't know, maybe that's not shocking. So movies, I think, are kind of important because it's the first mass entertainment medium for people, even before radio. So movies, the same movie can be played in Iowa, it can be played in New York City. So everyone throughout the country is going to be watching the same films, which is kind of significant because it's helping to create a mass culture. So again, those people in Iowa who are watching the same film that people are watching in New York, they're seeing the same clothing, they're listening to the same music. So all of that helps to create a mass culture for America. And then eventually radio will help to enhance that as well. So there's Birth of a New Nation. Working class leisure, people want to go out, they want to have a good time, they want to go have a drink. So saloons, even though the temperance movement is going on during this time, you do have people wanting to go and relax and have a drink. One thing that's kind of interesting, something relevant that we talked about, is the saloon keepers. They're important people when it comes to political machines because a lot of times the saloon keeper was actually working with the political machine, and their job was to kind of listen. A lot of what was going on, a lot of these people in the saloons were immigrants. They were the working people. They were the people that were voting. So the saloon keepers were there to listen and to report to the precinct captains or the machine, the boss themselves. So they were kind of an important cog in that machine. Reading and music, people did that. You had the dime novels, which are like your cheap romances and cowboy stories. Tales of the Wild West, detective stories, that type of thing. Again, music was something that was really popular that people listened to. I actually found a really cool album on Rhapsody. That's all Gilded Age music. I won't torture you with that. I was thinking about it. Maybe at the end I might play it. But, yeah. So people listen to music. There's that phonograph. So we're talking about Edison and phonographs and record players. Little Women. Maybe you've read that book. Horatio Alger, you might want to remember that. That pops up on the AP test every now and then. He wrote these stories largely of hardworking young people who started off with very humble beginnings. They're basically rags to riches story, hence the name Ragged Dick. I know that sounds horrible. Ragged Dick. Sounds inappropriate. Anyways, these stories, like I said, they were all rags to riches type of stories. So people who started off in more humble, dire situations, but through hard work, they actually were able to move up the social ladder and become successful. High culture in the cities, you're going to see a lot of the upper class people wanting to separate and segregate themselves from lower class, even middle class people. Remember we talked about how cities were divided racially, by ethnicity, but also by class as well. So you'll have your elites living in certain areas and segregating themselves from the masses of society. They also will develop their own cultural and intellectual life. Again, a lot of these people are the ones who are going to be putting their money towards the development of the arts, museums, and things like that. Some of the more important authors that you should remember from the time: Mark Twain. Realism is something that a lot of authors are going to be writing in the style of. It makes sense. I mean, you're looking at the Gilded Age, and you're looking at all these changes taking place, and for some people, they're going to write about those changes and what industrial society was like. Mark Twain's going to write in what's called local color. So he's going to be looking at words and phrases and stuff that were particular to the South, because that's where his books are largely taking place. One of my favorite books of all time is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Love that book. I like Huckleberry Finn as well. I don't know if you guys had to read that, but I love Mark Twain books. They're great. Again, it gives you like a really good indication of how people spoke during that time, what they thought, and stuff. So I really like the realism that comes out of his books. So speaking of realism, social realism in literature, effort to recreate urban social reality. So a lot of the authors of the time, like I said, are going to be writing more so about the social realities of urban areas. So in the background, if you remember, there's that picture that was taken by Jacob Riis in the Lower East End of New York. So these are some of the books that were kind of significant from the time. Again, this is stuff that you don't really need to memorize. You've got Maggie, A Girl on the Streets, and other stories. Theodore Dreiser's Sister Carrie. These are both really gritty books dealing with the situation for women during this time. You know, Maggie basically, being a woman of the street. Talks about prostitution and things like that. So very realistic accounts of what some women in urban areas had to deal with. That a lot of women, they didn't really have any other options. So, very powerful books about the time period and what women had to go through. Frank Norris's book is about the railroads in the West and the struggle between the farmers and the railroads, which is something we'll talk about when we look at the growth of the populists, which came out of the farmers' alliances and the Granges. And one of their big issues was that the railroads, they were charging like ridiculous fares, or rates I should say, for the little farmer to use the rails, as opposed to like the big industrialists. So it was something that they wanted to see reform in. So if you remember, we looked at the Munn case, the Wabash case, all of that's dealing with the issues that farmers are dealing with the railroads. Another really cool book, and I don't know if you guys will read this while you guys are in school, but another good book we'll talk about is called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. He will also be, this book, it wasn't intended to be of muckraking journalistic style, but it kind of turned out to be that way. Sinclair is going to be writing about the life of immigrants in industrial Chicago in the meatpacking industry. So it's a frank account of that, but also what comes out of this book, which is really important, is that he's going to be writing about the meatpacking industry itself and food production in America. Remember, there's no regulations during this time. There's no regulations on food production. It is nasty. Okay, we will look at how meat was produced during this time, and you guys are going to be rather disgusted by that. And this book is actually going to prompt Theodore Roosevelt and Congress to actually implement actual real legislation, real changes. Oh, my little doggy came in. You want to see my dog? Here. Abby. There she is. Say hello. Say hello. There's my Abby girl. She said, what's up? There we go. I don't know what she probably wants her dinner or something, but you're going to have to wait. So anyways, yeah, Sinclair talks about the meatpacking industry itself, and it's going to lead to actual legislation that is going to clean up the food industry. And we'll look at that in another unit, in the progressive unit, the next one. Don't really need to know about Henry James, but a lot of his books they're very uniquely American, talking about again, there's the Portrait of a Lady about American women. Same thing with the Bostonians. Talking about the women question. What is the role of women in society? Is it this cult of domesticity? Should they be more out and about in society? That's the women question of a time period. So his books, some of his books anyways, are going to deal with that issue. And also with the upper class in society. Art in the age of the city. Our art still is not going to quite be competing with European art, but we're getting there. We're breaking away and kind of experimenting and doing our own things. In Europe during this time, probably one of the biggest movements that you may be familiar with. They had realism and romanticism, but Impressionism is something that's going to come out. So you have some pretty legit artists like Monet and Gauguin and Renoir. These people are considered like giants when it comes to art. We have some people that are pretty impressive, but nothing quite on this scale. Portrait painting was still something that was popular, but I think you're going to see a lot more playing with color and shadows and things like that. So John Singer Sargent and his Portrait of Fanny Watts, 1877. I really like this this painting of a woman playing Lady Macbeth. The colors in this, to me, are just fantastic. Thomas Moran, we have some landscapes. So the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. If you've ever been to Yellowstone, they do have their own little Grand Canyon. So cool picture of that. George Irons, The Spirit of Autumn. Another George Irons. James Whistler, I really like his stuff as well. He's one of the first Western artists to incorporate themes of like Asian, Oriental, well, it's not PC, but Oriental types of themes within his work, and I think I have a piece of his work that shows that. I think that he's more concerned with color. He's not so concerned with the natural representation of things. He's not like a hardcore realist. He really wants to play around with color and whatnot. So I think that's cool. The arrangement of his stuff is a little bit unique. The colors he uses. Here's another one of his, The Symphony of Gray and Green. Again, the idea of color. And it kind of has Asian theme to it. Winslow Homer, I like his stuff. It's very folk arty, very American. This is called The Blackboard. So he did a lot of paintings of like schoolhouses and kids and stuff. This is one of my favorite Winslow Homer's, called Snap the Whip. It was a game that kids played. He also, one of the things that he's known for is he did a lot of drawings. He was a soldier in the Civil War, and so he actually would do drawings of a lot of the soldiers while he was serving. So some of those paintings and drawings are really neat. He moved to watercolors and did a lot of scenes in the sea. So this one's called Canoe in the Rapids. This is one of his most famous paintings, Sailing the Catboat. One thing that's kind of cool comes out during this time and I think is uniquely American is something called the Ashcan School. To be honest, I'm not really sure why it's called the Ashcan School. But what they're really trying to do, the important thing here is the stark portrayal of realities of the industrial period. And you can really see that in this painting that I have on here. They're looking at expressing themselves. It's more modern in nature. And I think they're taking the nod from some of the Europeans as well, some of the Impressionists and more of the modern artists of Europe. George Bellows' stuff is really cool. Actually, I like all these paintings. I think they're really neat. You've probably seen this one, Edward Hopper. There was a remake of this one. I think they put Elvis and, oh God, who else is in there? Marilyn Monroe, Bing Crosby, or somebody like that. But this is the original one of them. There's another Hopper. Architecture. Oh, before I get on to move on to the architecture, from the time period, one of the artists of what was called the Ashcan School, his name was Robert Henry, and I love this quote that he has. He said, "Art for life's sake rather than art for art's sake." And I think that's really what art is really all about. Some of the artwork you see, it's just art for art's sake. But this stuff, I think there's a lot more emotions and meaning involved in it. So architecture during the time, there's a lot of attention to that. Again, they just don't want to put up these buildings just for the heck of it. They want it to look pleasing to the eye. So we have a lot of modern architecture of the time, highlight of the function of the building, like what was the building being used for, and then using architecture that would kind of complement that. So Louis Sullivan is going to be one of the popular architects for the time. He's more traditional, breaking away from the classical, using ornaments like the arches, and this one's more traditional style, but definitely moving away from that, more ornaments, and again looking at the function of the building is important to him. There's another Sullivan, again very modern looking. And then the last one here is the style called Richardsonian. This actually appeared on an AP test one year a long time ago. So, you never know. Richardsonian stuff is pretty cool. I think it's very Gothic in nature. If you look this up, you Google it, and you can look at some homes that are in the style of Richardsonian. They're pretty neat. They have these high vaulted arches and these rooftops that are real pointy like that. And it just looks kind of eerie and creepy. And I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. Reminds me of like Gotham City or something like that. I don't remember what this building is. Do I have it in my notes? I do not. Oh well. So development of American modernism in art, I think that's kind of the key point here. We're glorifying the ordinary, looking into the future. We're prizing the new. We're experimenting. We're becoming more expressive. So I think all positive things when it comes to art for the time. Oop. And that brings us to the end. So I think that we will end this, and I will play a song from this lovely album that I found. Let's do, how about the Anti-Monopoly War Song. So I leave you with the Anti-Monopoly War Song.